Hey guys, my name is Kevin Carr. Today I'm going to be talking about how I learned Python at my first job. So, for this particular time of my life, I was part of a business rotation program at my previous employer, IBM. And during that business rotation program, I was part of the data analytics team. And one of those days, we needed to basically analyze a bunch of customer feedback data, but all the data was given to us in Excel or .csv format. Now they wanted us to manually go through this information and figure out basically the tonality, remove personal information, and then also determine the language for that particular row of customer feedback data. And when I heard that, I just couldn't believe that that was required for this particular project and work task. And I just thought there has to be a better way to do this, to save time, to not waste so much time on this particular task, especially since it was repetitive, it would be boring. Thankfully, I was able to search up, I believe, how to automate Excel. And what came up to me for me was the book by Al Swigert, How to Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. In that book, they had the first, I want to say, 6 chapters where it teaches you the basics of Python, but also later chapters how to automate reading through Excel spreadsheets, how to parse data. And from there, I knew I could use Python in order to basically automatically parse for every row of data. So why was this important? Because the Excel spreadsheet was greater in size than 100,000 rows of data. And I know it would just take forever to do. So from that book, I was able to pick the appropriate amount, like just learn enough Python. I didn't expect to be a master, but I knew logically that what I needed to do was read every row on the Excel spreadsheet, get the customer feedback sentence, remove any personal information that was in that sentence, identify the language, and then also that personal information could also be like a telephone number, things like that, email address. So removing that, and then also the tonality and the language. Thankfully, 2 parts of that project, I used internal APIs through Bluemix, which is kind of like IBM's flavor of cloud. So think about like AWS or GCP or Microsoft Azure. And I was able to, like, as I read through every single row, just put that sentence into that API, so the language detection and tonality, and it would give me a result. I believe it was a float or decimal result, so that was easy to write to a new spreadsheet. Now, in terms of removing the personal information, things like the email addresses, phone numbers, and person's name, last name, what have you, I had to use Automate the Boring Stuff book plus search online how to identify pronouns, how to identify emails, and how to identify phone numbers. So a great thing about the book too, it also talked about regular expressions, specifically phone numbers. It could be in a general pattern. I didn't know too much about regular expressions, but I searched more and more online and was able to get a good pattern that was able to remove almost all phone numbers from this customer feedback data. Now, in terms of the email addresses, same thing, similar pattern, @ symbol in the middle. There's going to be a .com at the end, and then also alphanumeric strings in between those. The hard part was actually finding out people's first name, last name, and removing that. And thankfully, after a couple Google searches, I think that took me like around a couple of weeks to figure that out, maybe a week or 2. I was able to find the Natural Language Toolkit, or the NLTK library, that exactly did that. It gave a score, or broke up the sentence into fragments and gave it a score to identify the most likely noun or pronouns in the sentence, and was able to remove the name, the first name and last name, based on that. I was able to automatically process the removal of personally identifiable information, detect the language and the tonality. So the last 2 free APIs again, and the personally identifiable information, just by using regular expressions, Natural Language Toolkit, and using the XLSX writer library. So it's basically a Python library for going through Excel spreadsheets. But I did it with a team, very, very fun project. And again, I wasn't a master of Python after it, but I was able to basically combine a bunch of small little skills, not necessarily skills, but what I learned. So from that book was very helpful in the automation part, but actually finding out how to remove that personally identifiable information came from Stack Overflow and a couple blogs that other programmers have written. So why do I say this? Basically, in your job, you could find ways to automate and then learn a language on the job. So you might not know it perfectly and you won't be a master at it afterwards. But I had a good base after that where I was looking for more ways to automate different team processes. So just look for any way you can when you're working with a team to automate these processes, and you'll learn by doing and experimenting. So that's the big thing. You'll learn by doing, experimenting, fail, see what's not working, and then try to get to work. And from there, I was able to build a great career that's like still ongoing as a software engineer. But I didn't know anything about programming before that. But through that book and some Google searches, I was able to get started. And you can get started too. You just got to find ways to make your life easier through programming. And there's a lot of free resources that you can use as well. So I'll make sure to include the link to the Automate the Boring Stuff book below in the description. But thank you guys for joining, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.